Good afternoon. I am Laura Greeley, Regional VP of IEB Southeast Asia and India. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today to the latest in our Revolve webinar series. This week, we turn our attention to Gen Z, a topic that I am asked about almost weekly by IEB members. While millennials have been hogging the headlines for the last decade, a new generation is driving digital growth and trends all around the world, and even more so here in Southeast Asia and India. This new group of consumers, creators, employees, native digital users are changing the consumer landscape faster than many brands are able to keep up with. As Gen Z enters the workforce and commands spending powers, the trends they're really driving globally and specifically in Southeast Asia only continue to accelerate. Today's session is moderated by Jessica Beaton, Director, APAC Media and Digital Marketing from Disney Studios, as well as IEB Southeast Asia and India Regional Board Member. She is joined by an esteemed panel representing TikTok, Spotify, and Kantar Millward Brown. Together, this panel will explore the traits of this generation, how vendors and brands are able to understand and reach them. This is a really interactive session, so please do feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function on your screens. Jessica, welcome. Thank you for moderating this session, and I will hand it over to you. Jessica, I do believe that we cannot hear you. I think what you said is you're going to log off and log back in again. I think we got that. Okay, that is fine, no problem. Well, I will, in the meantime, while Jessica's getting sorted, if we could have our other panelists join us, and I will hand over to them to introduce themselves. So I will take it through. Chito, can you start first, please?
Sure, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name is Chito Jusi. I am a director with Kantar Millward Brown. I run their media domain for Singapore and Southeast Asia. So I've been with them for a couple of years, but my background isn't in measurement as most of my colleagues in Kantar have. My background is actually media planning and buying. I've spent it's been 20 years now, in different media agencies around the region. While I am in Kantar Millward Brown, my main expertise is media, so both on the planning side and on the research side.
So can I guess from your introduction that you maybe don't sit in Gen Z?
I'm sorry?
You maybe don't sit within Gen Z then?
Many decades ago, I would have. I do have 2 Gen Z children, though, so I have firsthand, sometimes very painful experiences of what it's like to be a Gen Z person.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. Chewy, do you want to give a bit of an introduction? Oh, I think I've also lost
She's
Chewy.
also on mute.
She's also on mute. Yeah, CN, I will switch to you then, and let's hope I'm able to get over these technical issues.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
All right. Okay, my name is CN, and I'm the Regional Head of Sales at Spotify Southeast Asia. I'm not going to review how many years I've worked in the industry, but primarily I've been involved in advertising and digital for quite a number of years. And yes, I am not a Gen Z.
Not a Gen Z. Jessica, have we got you back with us?
Hopefully. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now, indeed. And Chewy, I'm just going to ask, can I hear you? Could you say something for a second? No. So Chewy, if you wouldn't mind logging back off and logging back in, Jess, I'll hand back over to you.
Okay. Well, we'll wait for Chewy to join us again, I think, to kick off, but I'll do her introduction while she's coming back on. So Chewy is the head of business marketing for TikTok for Southeast Asia. So we have some great Gen Z focused brands with us, and I'm very excited to be able to talk with everyone today. Okay, so shall we give her a minute? I think she's back. Welcome. Julie, can we hear you now?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, great.
So I just did a quick introduction that you're responsible for brand marketing for TikTok. Would you like to say anything else as an introduction, or shall we jump right in?
All right. So maybe I'll just do a quick introduction. So, per Jessica's introduction, I lead TikTok's business marketing efforts across Southeast Asia. My role is to help brands and businesses tap the power of digital technologies and enable them to connect with their consumers in an authentic and creative way. I've been in the media and tech industry for over 15 years now, at the brand side, the platform side, the media side, as well as the tech side. And no, I'm not a Gen Z.
None of us
Awesome.
are.
Thank
Over
you guys.
to you, Jessica. Yeah.
I thank you guys so much for being here. So I guess we've all been using this term Gen Z. So maybe I'll just start with defining what that is for everyone here and on the call. So Gen Z are essentially broadly defined as people, depending on which study you read, between ages 14 and 22 or 16 and 24. However, sort of age range you define that group are starting to come into workforce, right? So these are our fresh grads, the people starting internships. They are a generation that didn't know the great financial crisis, most of them, or 9/11, or any lot of big events that have defined the generations before. So what we're seeing from a trend perspective is really exciting. And I guess that's where I want to start with you guys. So maybe, I guess, first question, Chito, to you. Do you want to help start defining what differentiates Gen Z, other than their age, from some of the previous generations?
Sure. So Kantar has done a study on Gen Z, Gen X, and Gen Y and how they consume media globally. And in Southeast Asia, that can be a little bit tricky because you can't really lump Southeast Asia into one region. I mean, each target audience per market is very distinct from each other. But we can take some general learnings out of it. For instance, that across this region, Gen Z is the least engaged with advertising, at least the way you think of traditional advertising is. They really get annoyed with ads the most. They hate getting interrupted, and that's especially true for digital ads. On traditional ads, they're not that annoyed so much, probably because there's a lot more ads that they get in touch with on digital rather than on traditional, and they do spend more time on digital media than traditional media. Gen X doesn't really hate advertising that much. In fact, if the advertising offers them the chance to find out more, especially if it's about their favorite brands, they actually do appreciate the ads more than either Gen Z or Gen Y. Gen Y has the highest ad engagement of the three generations. They're the ones that when they see an ad that is interactive, if they can like it, comment on it, or share it, they begin to have they have a positive view of that particular brand and that advertising that they've seen. They do hate getting distracted as well, but not to the point that Gen Z hates getting distracted. And I'll add on a little bit because sorry, Jessica, do I still have time or?
Yeah, if you have one more. There's so much you gave us that we're going to deep dive into
rambling.
a lot of it.
Okay, you know what? Why don't we give the others a chance to speak first, and then I'll just interject myself later on.
Awesome. Okay, great. We'll definitely come back to a lot of that. So I think that was a really good framework. Now, I think on Spotify and on TikTok, you've seen a lot of those sort of differences come to life. So maybe, Jusi, if you want to start and tell us a little bit of how you've seen those generational differences come out on TikTok.
Sure. So we know that Gen Z are a diverse and complex group, and we can't reduce them to a simple caricature. But we do see some themes across this group on TikTok. And one such theme is the need for authenticity, right? A little bit of context to that. We know that baby boomers grew up as television was expanding dramatically. Gen X then grew up as a computer was introduced. And then we have millennials that came of age during the internet explosion. So what is truly unique for Gen Z is that all of the above, television, computer, the internet, they were all around. They have been a part of their lives right from the very start. The iPhone was launched in 2007, and that's when the oldest Gen Z we know was 10 years old. So how do you engage with this group that has been exposed to so much media? A more nuanced take to Chito's earlier point about Gen Z having short attention spans and not engaging with ads. We actually challenged that notion because we saw that the time that Gen Z spent on TikTok and the engagement levels on TikTok clearly disputes that. According to GWI, the engagement level of Gen Z on TikTok in Southeast Asia is 66%. 66%, that's a remarkably high level of engagement. So we know that it's not that they are distracted or short on attention, but when they're not engaging with you, when they're not engaging with your ads, it's because they are bored, right? It's because they have a low tolerance for insincere, inauthentic content or ads that are lackluster or disruptive. So And our message to brands is that on TikTok, we urge brands to collaborate with users, with the community, to create user-generated content. Because we see that such content is very well received by Gen Z, because people trust people, Gen Z trust other Gen Z. And still on the topic of authenticity, there is a concept we talk about a lot at TikTok, and that is flawsome, right? Which is made up of the word flaws and awesome. We believe that flaws can be awesome. And given the amount of media exposure that Gen Z get, we know that they have grown quite wary of traditional ads or brand stories that come across as overly polished or curated. So we encourage brands to be comfortable showing their authentic selves. This is not about pointing out your disadvantage, but really to be comfortable embracing your imperfections as a brand.
Awesome. Again, a lot of incredible stuff to start with. And it's really interesting, sort of that counterpoint with some of the data that Chito was talking about, because I think they can both be true, right? The idea that Gen Z does have a very short attention span for things that aren't aligned with their values, and vice versa. And a lot of what we're trying to talk through maybe today is where those sort of disconnects are. So we can sort of move into a better place together. So I think they sit alongside each other and show us something that there's a lot more to dig into. And let's keep digging. So Yen, from a Spotify perspective, we know streaming has been another core part of what we've seen as Gen Z has come up. So give us your thoughts of how you've seen this develop with this generation versus some of the elders.
Sure. So firstly, I learn something new every day. I'm going to tell my kids I am a flawsome dad. So we've been talking about this, right? Digital is their lifeblood. And on Spotify, we see that because of that, they are a lot more international than previous generations. They're more exposed to the global music culture. And recently we conducted a study called Culture Next. And I just wanted to share 2 points out of the whole study. Firstly, around how vocal they are. And we asked them a lot of questions around society, brands, etc. And we find that Gen Zs are a lot more of an initiator and a self-starter. They see challenges they want to address. They're not just talking about it on social media, but they're using the digital tools through music, etc., to band together. And when we actually asked them a question about, what is the role of a brand within their society, and they Gen Z said that they wanted brands to be more empathetic, be more authentic, and amplify their values. Basically, take part in the debate. But talking about music, right, we have a lot of data, as you know, from Spotify, and there are some differences in terms of their music streaming habits. So time, for example, Gen Zs are streaming a lot more at night, between 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., while the other users are actually streaming between 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. They are also more likely to consume new content, which is right now podcasts, which is the in thing for us. So they do consume more podcasts than the other generations. The moments that they are listening to are also much higher. So they index higher when it comes to gaming moments, what we classify as moody moments, and also moments where they're trying to get sleep. Right. So these are some top moments for Gen Z. The other way is how they actually consume it. So millennials, as we also surveyed millennials are likely to be more in control. They want to build their own playlists. They want to, choose and pick their songs. But we found that Gen Zs are more inclined to receive our algorithmic recommendations. So if you're a Spotify user, you probably have, used Discover Weekly every Monday or New Music Friday. So the Gen Zs consume that a lot more. And of course, in terms of pop culture, we saw recently when Bohemian Rhapsody hit the big screens, right? We saw over 3,000% spike in Queen's music amongst a much younger audience. I mean, most of these people haven't even heard of Queen's music in the past, right? So there are a lot of differences when it comes to music consumption.
Wow. Okay. These are some great trends that I hope everyone is taking notes on, because that really, these differences about trust in the algorithm, right? That's so much of also what TikTok's sort of strength is, right? It's millennials turning to that because they do trust in a lot of the types of content. And I think it goes back a bit to also the authenticity that both you and Chewy had talked about. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. Because if people are trusting these algorithms to bring content to them, then we need to be brands that are bringing the right information and the right aesthetic to them so they will consume it, or else we're going to have that disjoint that Chito mentioned. So I guess the question is maybe, Yen, if you want to start, and then Chui, we can go to you. I'd love to hear more about how you see brands meeting our Gen Z consumers in that authentic way. What are they doing on their platforms that you see is really working and connecting?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the before that, I wanted to say that one of the trends we saw in our Culture Next report was that the Gen Zs are actually creating communities or micro communities and forming tribes based on same cultures, fashion, social causes. So for a good example is in Philippines, a very high percentage of Gen Zs are an online friend with someone else from a different country. So understand firstly from a brand's perspective that they are very well connected. An example was when two young sisters in Bali, they actually rallied global support, right, to advocate against single-use plastic. Right, they went on a hunger strike. They created petitions, got the attention of the Bali's governor, and then that really helped them. And in fact, they got onto quite a few global platforms after that. So it just shows how the Gen Zs are quite an activist. But we also see that in terms of brands that are working with them, I take Spotify for example first, right? We realize that the Gen Zs are not just consumers of our music; they also care about the people who created them. So during the recent pandemic, or we're still in it right now, we started a project called Spotify COVID-19 Music Relief. But that music relief project was to support artists and creators, because while they're still getting money from streams, a lot of their revenue has been put on hold, like their live performances and not getting new sponsorships. So this was important to the younger generation, because then we see this kind of conversations get appreciated by them within their social media space. And another example, it's got to do with music as well, is of a brand meeting this Generation X in terms of the causes is Unilever. So in Philippines recently, Unilever, they've always been known to empower women. And during the pandemic, women in Philippines were feeling slightly anxious, and Dove in Philippines wanted to be their source of confidence, right? Pushing them to ignore, break the usual beauty standards, because you're staying at home so much, etc. So they launched a partnership with one of a Pinoy rapper called KZ Tandingan. And this Pinoy rapper, she has outrageous hairstyles. She released a single called My Hair, My Say. And, it talks about, social conversations in regards to overcoming fear of judgment. And releasing this feature within, I mentioned earlier, New Music Fridays on Spotify, that really helped to amplify the campaign. So these are just some examples of what we've seen brands, looking at what the Gen Zs care about.
Right. And how do you see that connect? What do you think is the most authentic part if we're talking about sort of authenticity from those campaigns? What do you think is the element that truly resonated there?
I think it's about speed as well, and understanding what is the cultural nuances and the issues at hand, right? And taking a stand and being very clear about what you want to do, not just following someone else's trend and joining a bandwagon. I think Gen Zs, from our research, says they want brands to make a stand and be clear about who they stand with or what side they stand with.
Absolutely. Okay, that's super clear, and I really appreciate those examples. So I guess, Julie, you must have a ton of sort of authentic brands trying to be authentic on the platform. So what do you think are the standouts, and what about those standouts do you think really hits that authentic tone with Gen Z?
Right. So maybe before I jump into the brand examples, so to give a bit of context, we do see that on TikTok, we see a shift from passive viewing to active engagement and even participation, where Gen Z actively participate in trends, in social causes, in conversations around important political, economic issues that emerge on the platform. So it's not about merely a like or a share, it is about joy. We see Gen Z actively using the TikTok platform to advocate for a range of causes, from climate action to mental health to youth causes. For instance, in Malaysia, we see youth driving an anti-cyberbullying campaign. The campaign is called Hentikan Bully, which literally means stop bullying. Right. And just last week, TikTok, in light of World Mental Health Day, TikTok launched a campaign globally in conjunction with WHO, with the World Health Organization, to raise awareness of the need to invest in mental health. It's called Move for Mental Health. And we saw many Gen Z responding to this campaign, to this challenge, and creating a lot of video content around this theme, how to physically get moving as part of the investment in your own mental health. And what does this mean for brands? So we know that Gen Z have a discerning eye for brand messaging and actions, right? They do expect businesses to support the causes they care about. And they're also increasingly using the power of their voice, the power of their social and content platforms, the power that they have on TikTok to shape corporate behavior. So how can brands tap on this? So brands can invite TikTok creators, TikTok users to participate in conversations and challenges around these causes. Beyond just a one-way pushing of a message, we urge brands to invite the community to co-create the content and co-create the conversation, and then using the TikTok community to amplify this message, whether it's about your brand values or about a cause that you support. So an example would be, we saw how TikTok in Southeast Asia and in India launched a small challenge. Right, Colgate's aim was to bring joy and uplift people, right, during this difficult time. They wanted to give people a reason to smile. And this is very much in line with Colgate's brand about optimism, which can be reflected by the smiles on people's faces. The campaign actually led to more than 42,000 users in Southeast Asia participating and generate more than 63,000 TikTok videos, right? A very nice campaign about spreading optimism and yet still tying very nicely to the brand's core message. In Singapore, we actually see many government departments, from the Economic Development Board to the National Youth Council, using TikTok to encourage youth and different generations to promote the causes they care about. So most recently, we saw a heritage center, Wisma Geylang Serai. So it's actually a Malay heritage center. They wanted to promote understanding of the Malay culture and give people a taste of a Malay heritage. So they invited users to actually replicate a traditional dance move, and then you can add on branded effects. You can take part in the hashtag challenge. And what was a really nice development is that we saw that there were actually many non-Malays and non-youths who actually jumped on this trend and took part in this challenge and promoting racial understanding in the country. So, and our message to all brands is that, my final message to all brands is that regardless of whether you choose to support a cause or not, it is truly important to remain authentic. You can't support a cause just to appeal to your consumers, just to get them to buy products. If you don't genuinely believe in it, if the cause is not aligned with your core values, your consumers can see through it right away. But if you do have a cause, then TikTok is a perfect platform for you to amplify the message.
Okay, awesome. So I guess usually we save questions until the end, but there's one that's come through that I think is really relevant to what we were just talking about here. And I think it's a challenge that a lot of brands face. So we have one question that says, how would the panel recommend bringing stakeholders for a brand along with the journey to be authentic, which can often be uncomfortable, particularly if there's user-generated content? And I think we all have to acknowledge that one of the reasons that maybe, and we're going to talk about with Chito in a second, that brands aren't investing as much in Gen Z is this sort of disconnect and the discomfort with being that authentic self. So I open this up to the panel. Do you guys have some suggestions or ideas of how brands can sort of manage their stakeholders in this space that is quite uncomfortable? So maybe Yen?
So that's a tricky question, right? Nobody wants to make a career-limiting move and within an organization, and it's really something which, at least speaking from a Spotify point of view, we look firstly at our own values. What are the values within your organization? Do not try and do something that's not within your own organization's values. And then, as Chewy mentioned earlier on, it's going to be very inauthentic. So firstly, look at those. What are your company values? Because if those are the company values, the stakeholders understand that as well. So at least you're coming in from a similar standpoint. and then think about, what are the issues that your particular audience that you want to address and the challenges they are going. So whether it's Gen Zs or maybe it's something that you want to do for millennials, understand what are the causes that they care about, because you do want to make sure that you align with that, and that cause has to align with your values. So it's not easy, right, to be able to balance both of this. But once you have seen and you have found what's right for your organization, you put plans in there, not as a campaign, right? It's not going to be a 3 months thing, as it's been spoken earlier on. The Gen Zs wants to make sure that you are seeing this through. So you got to make sure that it's long term. That involves both time, money, and also a lot of stakeholders within there. And ultimately, if you do make mistakes along the way, be very real about, saying, I tried, I'm doing something that's right. I felt it's right. No, I know it's right because it's part of our company core values. And as Chewy mentioned earlier on, if you have any flaws, apologize, they will forgive you, because the Generation Z are a lot more forgiving.
Right.
Oh,
And
sorry, Chewy?
right, and I can build on what Ian shared as well. So this definitely is not an easy question to tackle, and we get that all the time from brands. They ask us, right? Like, TikTok encourages us to be authentic, but how does that align with our brand guidelines? We need to put the logo here and the color there. So I think one misconception that we want to address is that authentic does not equate poor quality. We're not saying that by being real, by being poor, we are going for poor quality or low quality work. So this can still be great, high quality work, but it allows you to show your vulnerabilities, a side of your brand that other brands may not see. So, and addressing the point about lack of control, again, by welcoming authenticity, by encouraging brands to collaborate with the community to either build user-generated content or to co-create content and trends, we're not saying that it is a free-for-all world, that is a wild west where anything goes. There are still limits to what it is. For instance, objectionable content, violent, graphic content will never be allowed on the TikTok platform and on many other internet platforms as well. So, and for the brand, typically when they embark on a conversation on TikTok, right, it is the brand together with TikTok setting the guidelines about how they want to shape the conversation. So when we have hashtag challenges where we invite TikTok users, TikTok creators to co-create content, whether it is using our branded effects, using our stickers, replicating an action or a dance move, it is all within controlled limits. So, for instance, what Zalora did in Southeast Asia to draw traffic to their fashion festival is that they created a Z hand sign. So they invited everybody to show off their wardrobe using this Z hand sign. So with every trigger of the Z hand sign, they change into an outfit. Right, so it is within Zalora's brand remit and brand's purpose that users, creators can then exercise their creativity to show to use the TikTok platform to show how they interpreted that brand message.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think that's really important to address as we go. Oh, absolutely.
Can I add on a little bit to what both of them said? So,
yeah,
I agree with CN in that the company values is basically what you have to align with the values of the media platform or the channel for you to be able to think whether or not you can give this a shot. But also, and I'm adding this on because I had a conversation with a client of mine a few weeks ago, and I vividly remember what he said. And what he said was that he was actually interested in advertising in TikTok that one time. So we were discussing it, what we can do, what we cannot do, that sort of thing. And then he told me that, look, I'm willing to experiment in that platform, but my global HQ does not want to because there are still issues about brand safety and about brand guardianship and stuff. And my company is very conservative when it comes to these things. So I think for some of these companies, especially the bigger ones, the multinational ones, the main issue is not whether they want to be authentic. It's how much control are they willing to cede to their consumers. And for a lot of them, the answer is not much. So for a lot of these advertisers, what we normally do, and I've seen this during when I was still in the media agency, is that education is the best path forward. You just have to show them what they're missing out on, because their job as marketers and at one point is to safeguard their brands, but also at the same time is to develop authentic and authentic engagement with their consumers. And you can only do that when you follow where they go. So if the consumer says they're on TikTok, that's where you have to have the conversation with them.
Yeah.
Or on Spotify.
That's awesome, because actually what I wanted to do is get into measurement, actually, because I think measurement is one of those key questions where it might not be the most authentic way in, but HQs often do listen to things that can be measured. And I know we have seen, and actually the Kantar study, Chito, which is I wanted to ask you about, has highlighted a bit of the disconnect between where brands invest, and it is around measurement. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about the study and where you've seen this disconnect and how it might be affecting Gen Z and Gen Z focused platforms.
Sure. So Kantar just came out with a global study about a week ago. And that study was to find out what the top brands were in terms of advertising and branding for both consumers and marketers. And globally, what we found was that for consumers, the top brand is TikTok. So it beat out Google, beat out Facebook, it beat out Instagram. So number one globally, and in a lot of the markets that we've actually that we've done the survey in, was TikTok. And what we found is what people thought TikTok was playful, it was fun, it was sexy, creative, and rebellious. And those were its top 5 attributes. And globally, those were the top 5 attributes that we thought people were looking for when they show preference for particular advertising or media channels. And that wasn't the main story, though, for that particular study. And although it is a very good story, especially for Chewy, what we found there was a huge divide between what marketers thought and what consumers thought. And TikTok being number one for consumers does not reflect in marketers' perception. For consumers, the top 5 brands globally was TikTok, followed by Instagram, Snapchat, Google, and then Twitter. For marketers, YouTube was number 1, Google was number 2, Instagram number 3, Facebook number 4, and Twitter number 5. So thereof, you can already see that there's a huge divide, or there's no meeting of the minds between consumers and marketers, which is interesting because more and more consumers are going to TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat, and you can see that those platforms are the ones where consumers have a lot of control over the content that goes on those things, whereas the ones that are tops with marketers, YouTube, Google, Facebook, those are the ones where there's not really control, but marketers have a lot of information with which to inform their campaign planning. They have a lot of data to make decisions on which markets to target, which segments to target, that sort of thing. But it doesn't necessarily translate into what consumers are going for and what consumers are engaging with in terms of media channels and platforms. There's such a big divide between marketers and consumers, and we see this across all the different markets that we conducted the study in, not just in Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front.
How do you see brands sort of overcoming that to bridge that divide? Do you think that's something that's brand-led, consumer-led? How do you think that will work?
Interesting question. I would like to say that I would love to think that it would be brand-led. But again, there's no easy answers to these things. There will always be some more adventurous and experimental brands that are willing to innovate, that are willing to take some risks, and that they are willing to engage with their consumers, even though it means a loss of control. I think personally, what would happen is TikTok and all of those other brands that I mentioned will reach such a critical mass of consumers and users that it will be impossible for brands to ignore them anymore, and they will have to be present on those platforms, regardless of whether they have control or not. I think that's what's going to happen.
Oh, fascinating. Yen, Chewy, do you have any thoughts on that? Or I have a follow-up for you guys otherwise. Okay, so I guess the next question for you guys is, one of the things that's accelerating that change that Chito just talked about has been COVID, right? It's sort of been the great accelerator in terms of app downloads, consumption of different services. Everybody's talking about how we're all ordering groceries online now for the first time. I don't know why that's such a cited statistic. But all of that has accelerated these trends that Chito sort of suggested is really going to bring brands to where consumers are. And so I think we've seen that for both of your platforms, both on Spotify and TikTok. So I was just wondering, from your perspectives, can you talk about how COVID has changed your business, your consumers around Gen Z and their consumption habits? So maybe, Yen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I'm going to refer back to our recent report as well, which was actually built just before COVID. Firstly, within Spotify, people listen to music different. The Gen Zs listen to music differently depending on where they are, what they're doing, who they're with, right? So music is kind of like soundtracking their lives. They don't just listen, they live it, right? So when we saw during pre-COVID, the moments or the time with people listening to music were more around driving, commuting, exercising, running. So these are the most streamed kind of music. But with COVID, obviously, things got flipped around. We observed some interesting shifts. One of the things that changed is, and we have a term for it. We're calling it every day is like a Sunday. So within the new streaming patterns, we see uplifts in moments like working from home, gaming, online shopping moments, music during household chores, and a lot of sleep music. Right? We also saw that this rise was very much during midday. So the music listening habit was during midday. And one thing that we were particularly excited about was that with the Gen Zs is the gaming moment, right? So we saw in the report 38% of, we saw recently with our data that 38% of Southeast Asian Gen Zs are streaming music while they are gaming. One example is Animal Crossing. I don't know whether any of you play that. The Animal Crossing team playlist went up by 1,000%, during this time. And, that's the sole reason why for us as a brand, we realized that, this is going to be a trend that's going to come on, and COVID really accelerated this gaming trend. So we recently went into a partnership with League of Legends as well. So yeah, those are the kind of changes that we have seen pre and during COVID or post-COVID now.
Oh, amazing. And I think that the big question is what will stick and how things will continue to shift. But it's great to know where we're starting so we can keep track of that. Chewy, something that you can share from TikTok as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess it is not surprising that TikTok saw a surge in user activity and engagement during the stay-at-home period, given that platforms like TikTok and others play a part in connecting people and communities even when you're physically apart. There were some media consumption patterns that we observed even before COVID-19, although this period accelerated that. And that is the shift from passive viewing and consumption to active participation and engagement. We saw the growth in the popularity of snackable content, short-form video content. So that is, again, not new, not surprising. But I do wanted to shine a light on two new patterns that I've observed during this period. And one is the growth of family content. So during this period, we actually saw an interesting trend of families coming together to jointly create family content. We see Gen Z involving their parents, their grandparents, and both are not just consuming content, but to co-create content together. Right, so using the TikTok platform to connect, to allow parents to engage with their children and maximize a family time. In fact, just recently, there was an article on BBC Asia that featured a family in Singapore doing that really well. That is Chef Bob. So you can check out that account, right? The other pattern that we saw emerging during this period is that there is greater connection across physical boundaries. Right, so whether you're a user in Bangkok or a user in Barcelona, right, you're not limited by physical boundaries. On TikTok and on other social and content platforms, we are able to connect with each other. So on TikTok in particular, there is this function called the duet function. So this actually allows you to feature two videos side by side, or somebody can use an original video, build off it, and create a duet. So what we have seen emerging during this time is that there are more cross borders duet videos, right? Where people do a Q&A with each other. They ask each other questions on their views on social issues, LGBT, and so on. Or they take part in an acting or a music challenge together. So we actually see that during this time, Gen Z being really creative and innovative on using the platforms, using the features on the platforms to break down physical boundaries.
Oh, that's fascinating because that really relates to some of the trends that Yen was speaking about as well, right? The micro communities. So we're just seeing that generation finding all platforms as a way to connect and to grow. And that it's brilliant to see that we're able to see that as a larger trend. That's only positive for the future generations. So I guess we have a few more minutes. So I have one more question, and then there are a couple of questions in the chat. Hopefully we'll be able to get to one or two. So I guess the last question for all of you guys, and we can just do a round robin, is what is sort of one or two of the main trends that you believe have been started by Gen Z that really resonate, that brands should be aware of and know? We've talked about a lot of different ones, but maybe we'll take this last moment to sort of highlight some of the key ones that you hope brands are tapping on. So let's start with Julie. Give us your one or two highlights that you think everyone should be focusing on.
So we see that like sometimes a video, a story created by Gen Z on TikTok can be the start of a totally new trend, right? The start of an exciting journey. As you see these video stories traveling far and wide as they get discovered and shared repeatedly. And as the idea of the trend catches on, the impact can cut across borders, cultures, languages, and even communities. So maybe I would shine a light on two trends. One of which is music discovery, and specifically discovery of old music. Right, we have saw that Gen Z has actually successfully revived many musical classics from the 70s, from the 80s, breathing new life into old songs, bridging that generation gap and actually a geographical gap to music connection. So in Southeast Asia, you might have certainly heard a lot of this Chinese song with the lyrics 雪花飘飘. Have any of you heard of that song, or we heard it again recently? This is actually a 1980s song from Taiwanese singer Fei Yuqing. So how it started was that there was a meme on TikTok that went viral worldwide. It skyrocketed the song to global popularity. The song was also trending in many Western countries. So I'm not sure whether you see that trend on Spotify too again. So that is one such trend, music discovery. Another trend is the reimagination of education. So I think typically people view learning, education, training as something that is boring and unexciting. But we saw Gen Z totally flipping this around on TikTok, right? We see Gen Z collaborating with educational institutions, with brands, with governments to introduce educational content in new and creative ways. An example in this part of the world is in Indonesia. In conjunction with National Learning Day, TikTok launched a campaign called Sama Sama Belajar. So we saw Gen Z in Indonesia coming on board in full strength, right, to share tutorials, DIY tips, life hacks, and the educational content that they produce can range from cooking tutorials, science and tech experiments, digital marketing tips, and they inspire other generations and other cultures to do so as well. So these are definitely trends that brands can make use of. The choice of music, and think about how you can share educational content, awareness content in new, fun, and creative ways.
Awesome, thank you. And since you mentioned music as a key one, I think it's only fair. Then, what are the broader music trends within that area that you want to highlight for Gen Z?
So I love it. We love music. So firstly, I think two things as well from my end. This is really a truly digital native generation, right? So the first one is around, we say that you need to super serve the micro communities. And this is the reason why is this is a generation of access over ownership when it comes to content, products, and service, right? Whether it's streaming, whether it's ride hailing, etc. There's very little ownership, a lot of access. So that means we have to think about how these digital natives discover content. So from our end, we realized that from a music standpoint, and Chewy at least said just now, there's no borders right now. So we see people, listening to different kind of music. There's a lot of international mix masters, as we call it, because, they have all the tools at their fingertips. And the kind of playlist they create as well is so mixed, whether it's Latino music, K-pop, everyone loves K-pop amongst Gen Zs. And therefore they're forming all these micro communities. Because all this generation allows for like-minded individuals to connect with each other. Brands need to understand that they're discovering things very, very differently. So that's on micro communities. And one example is when you talk about live music, right? Today there are not many that's available because of COVID. and things have gone virtual. But you understand that, how they discover things within live music is very different. You can actually have a one-to-one interaction with them within a virtual event, where in the past, if you pay less, you can smell the tar in the road. When you pay more, you can smell the sweat from the artist. But now everybody has equality when it comes to one-on-one, when it's in a virtual setting. The second one, very quickly, is really that we in our recent survey, we found that Southeast Asians are spending more than 10 hours on screens, right? So that is especially the young Gen Zs. That's resulting in the burnout for them, including, people on the webinar now. We're probably experiencing that working from home. There is a big rise on screenless moments. So the brands need to think about how, apart from where you are facing them, where they are hearing about you as well. So audio being one part of it, brands need to think about their sonic branding. A lot of brands have started doing that in 2019, and a lot more now need to think about it, right? So when you're thinking about it, you need to also bring in the parts for Gen Zs where you're empathizing, you're understanding where they're coming from, their moods, their moments, their mindset. So, two things, micro communities and then screenless moments.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think those are both really actionable for the brands on the call today. And so last but definitely not least, Chito, round us up. What are the two trends that you're seeing across Southeast Asia for Gen Z?
So it's not so much trends, but recommendations, I guess, for the marketers and the brand managers on this call. We've talked a lot about interactivity, so I won't go through that. We've talked a lot about music, and that's really powerful too, so I won't go through that as well. I think what we didn't really discuss in detail, and that what I would bring out now, is the use of humor in communicating with Gen Z. And when we did our research, we found that humor is the top reason why Gen Zs would actually not skip a skippable pre-roll ad on online platforms. So having a humorous ad, and it's different per market, because what's funny in Singapore might not really translate to being funny in Thailand, for example. But humor, if done correctly, can actually be a good way to communicate with Gen Z. And aside from humor is the use of celebrities. And Gen Z doesn't really use or see celebrities in the way we do. Like Kim Kardashian is a celebrity, or some people think she is. What they think of as celebrities is what Chewy and CN talked about earlier, the more authentic, the more authentic ones. And it feels peculiar, but because to Gen Z, it feels like the smaller a celebrity is, the more authentic and powerful they are. They have more influence over the ones that have millions of followers on their social media platforms, at least for this generation. And what I would like, my last word on this would be, the reason why we're having this call, the reason why we're having this panel is because a lot of people don't know a lot about this particular consumer segment, Gen Z. And I would advise, or at least I would suggest to the marketers and brand people on this call, that on your next campaign, when you're developing it, when you're thinking about strategy, please overinvest on platforms or strategies to reach and communicate with Gen Z, because we don't really know much about them, and we're only now learning about them as consumers. So we know a lot about Millennials and Gen X. There's a ton of information about those guys already. But Gen Z, they're just up and coming, and they're basically coming into their own. And this is the time to experiment on strategies and platforms and ideas that can reach them better than previous generations, because they are getting more and more important as the days go along.
And that is the perfect note to end on. Thank you for that. So I really appreciate all of your time, Chewy, Chito, Yen. This has been a really insightful discussion. So with that, thank you, and I hand it back over to Laura.
Thank you guys so much. I've been taking notes furiously. I'm gonna try and integrate Blossom, Everyday Sunday, Access over Ownership, and possibly my favorite, Smell the Sweat of the Artist. That made me chuckle. You guys, thank you so much. There's still a lot of questions that came in that we unfortunately ran out of time for, but if those people on the call want to reach out to me directly, they can, and I can help link you in with the right people. Chewy, Chito, Jessica, and CN, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it, and we hope that you'll join us again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.